Anisha, it's nice to see you again. And Thomas, so glad you could join us. Tate, it's great to see you too. And can we all welcome Wendy and Ricky? So we're so glad you could join us.
I just gave you socially distanced elbow.
That what?
I gave them the elbow. No, that's what we're supposed to do these days.
Right.
We don't hug. We don't.
Right. Yes. Yes. We can all bump elbows. Hi.
And Tariq,
Hi, Tariq. Nice to meet you. Great to see you. So glad you could join us.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too, Carolyn.
So, okay. So we're on page 10 and 11.
just give me a minute to move my screen around and I will get there.
Did you guys have a chance to review last year's district needs?
So for all the new members, I don't know if you want to explain what this district needs and how we've done it in the past. We're a very small subcommittee, and what are our focus, and also because, we discussed yesterday at land use and zoning that given the COVID-19 impact, we added some language that is specific about fears of the planning sector in that case about the impact of COVID-19, but we also gave recommendations to Jim that he agreed with us about a broader statement in the beginning of the budget remarks that will talk about our disappointment with the things they decided to cut, because they cut a lot of very important, resources for CB3. And so I like, that our district relies upon,
Right.
especially at HPD, etc.
Well, I think maybe one of the best thing to do is to start out, maybe that we could all introduce ourselves, okay, and how we're involved with the committee. Also, what we've been asked by the community board is to use Robert's Rules of Order, so that if you want to speak, please raise your hand. It's in the chat function, I believe, or participants. Which is it, Michael?
It's in the participants tab. Just raise your hand. I mean, Carolyn, it's really up to you as the chair of the committee. If you want to run it a different way, you don't have to run it. You don't have to use the raise hands feature since you are a smaller committee, but meeting online virtually gets a little messy when there's a lot of people who want to try to talk at the same time. So I would suggest using the raise hands feature, but it's not required.
Right, no, I know. It has been suggested several times. So at any rate, if you'd like to raise your hand to speak, please use the participants section so that you can raise your hand and then you can be recognized to speak, because what they're trying to do is encouraging having one person at a time speak. Arts and Culture is a subcommittee of the Economic Development Committee. Anisha, would you like to chime in there, because you're the chair of Economic Development?
Sure. I'm Anisha. I'm chair of Economic Development. I am newly the chair, so I am joining this meeting as my first one, as participating in the Arts and Culture Subcommittee. So thank you, Carolyn, for having me here, and excited to work with you.
We're really glad to have you, and you have great experience in arts and culture, so that's a real asset. Thomas, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm new to the board since October. I filled in a vacancy, and now I'm serving my first full term. This is the first meeting that I made for this committee. I am a part of the committee. I'm an educator in the district. I'm the dean of students at a school on East 4th Street and First Avenue. Heavily involved in the arts in the community locally with special needs students. My son attends the Star Academy, and he's involved with a lot of community-based organizations that service him. So I benefited from arts programming. I do a lot of work with people at St. Mark's, and we've done a lot of residencies to just give a voice to students with special needs. So that's part of why I'm here. Mm-hmm.
Well, so glad you're here. Tati?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tati. This is my second year on the board. Yay. And yeah, I'm born and raised in the Lower East Side, and I'm also a filmmaker. I studied filmmaking at college. So, yeah.
So, Olympia?
Hi, you unmuted me the moment I was unmuting myself. So I'm Olympia Kazi. I've been in the board for 3 years. Prior to that, I was a frequent flyer. I got involved with CB3 because my background is in architecture and urban planning, and I was concerned, especially with the two bridges and with the East River Park, and with generally the gentrification. However, in the last 4 years, I have become more and more involved with cultural advocacy. I was one of the people who led the campaign for the infamous cabaret law that required people a permit in order to dance. And it was used to discriminate against LGBTQ and people of color. And we were able to repeal this law after 93 years, and they were trying for 3 decades to repeal it. So as a result of that, we also established an Office of Nightlife, and I was asked from the City Council to serve as the Nightlife Advisory Board. And I do deal a lot with all kinds of arts that have to deal also with nightlife. So a lot of performing artists, music workers, dancers, all sorts of performers. And right now, in terms of the district needs, I can bring a lot of experience of the stories that I hear from the impact that it has on people that are not going to go back to work until there is a vaccine. And so this budget that we're talking about next year is still going to be key for these people, because they're not going to go back to work. And live performance and touring is not going to restart until there is a real solution. And so I guess phase 400. So
that's great to have that input. So let's go to Tariq. Tariq, it's so nice to have you aboard.
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be on this committee. Hi, I was born and raised in the Lower East Side. I still live in the Lower East Side. I grew up a part of programs like Rosie's Theater Kids, Dancing Classrooms, and I danced at Alvin Ailey and went to college at University of North Carolina School of the Arts for dance. Came back and founded my own nonprofit. So I run an arts nonprofit for youth, bridging arts and social issues, and based out of the Lower East Side Girls Club. I used to be at Lower East Side Center, operating a Saturday program there. And so now I operate the Saturday program here, and also we're now currently in our summer arts virtual program. But I'm also an educator. I've taught across the country. And recently I was also the dance faculty at Martha Valley High School, which is closing this next year. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, but I'm so excited to be on this committee.
Well, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
That it's a real asset. So Ricky. Hi, Ricky?
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, okay, great. So glad you could join us.
Thanks, guys. I was also born and raised Lower East Side, Chinatown. I live at Knickerbocker Village, which is down near the FDR and the East River. Worked in city government for about 14 years, 9 years at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and like 5 years at the Department of Health. So I'm also on the Health Committee as well, too, naturally. Very interested in this committee. Used to play musical instruments back in junior high school. It was part of the curriculum went to junior high school on the Upper East Side. Right now I work for a private developer that's mainly situated in CB1, and they do a lot of arts-based community initiatives. One thing that they're doing right now is something called the Echo exhibit, where we had a poet survey a number of Lower East Side representatives, Lower Manhattan representatives and residents, and they basically crafted poems from their conversations, and then they're on display down at the South Street Seaport. So these are some of the projects that we're doing at our art space. So I just wanted to see where we are as a community board.
Well, thanks again. I'm so glad you're here. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy. I was born and raised here in Lower East Side Manhattan as well. My background is a little different. I do currently work in Cornell Medicine, but I did go to high school for math, science, and engineering, and was an architecture student for about 2-3 years. And when I was younger, I did take many art classes. I always loved art. And I always loved walking through Chinatown and seeing all like the different murals that were put up like everywhere.
Yeah, that I love it. Walking through, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's always such
Yeah.
like a visual feast, literally, to go through
Right?
there. Yeah, for sure. Well, it's really great for arts and culture to have this many people on the committee and to have people who are interested in promoting arts and culture in the Lower East Side. So I don't know if you all had a chance to review the district needs that we had drafted last year. And maybe if we could go through some of the points and ask if you have suggestions about what we can add to this. So at any rate, let me move this over.
Anisha, do you have a question? You have your hand up.
Sure. Carolyn, could you just explain what the district needs
Yes.
is
Right.
and like how it will be used by the community board? I think it would be
Okay,
helpful.
the district needs is a document that's drafted by the community board every year. And each committee drafts their own district needs that highlights the needs for their particular community that they're serving. When we had drafted this last year, we were in the throes of, we had just wrapped up the drive from the Department of Cultural Affairs with Create NYC. And a lot of our comments and that were incorporated into the district needs came from that event, because it had been a series. I don't know if any of you participated in that. With the Department of Cultural Affairs, there were a lot of different workshops and opportunities for people to participate. And the idea was that there needed to be more diversity in the arts, and there were very specific suggestions as how the Department of Cultural Affairs could incorporate diversity into their programming and to their funding for diversity in the different areas of the arts in New York City. And,
Can we ask someone who's typing to mute themselves?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The rain is getting really loud.
It's not typing, it's the rain, I believe. Everybody's on mute.
Ah.
I believe it's the rain hitting Carolyn's window or air conditioner or something.
Yeah, that the rain is hitting the air conditioner and it's making a lot of racket. So, okay.
Carolyn, one other thing to add is that about the district needs is that we're writing this for fiscal year 22, which starts next
definitely.
July. So since there are a lot of new committee members, I think it's important to remember that it's sort of odd timing to, be writing about what the area of the East Village, Lower East Side, Chinatown needs in terms of cultural and art support, but it's for the future.
And also to be precise, Anisha, I think we're talking about
Right.
the budget that will be voted on July 2021, actually.
Correct.
Right, we did. And it's just basically also too, I think everybody's world has been totally upside down with COVID, and what we're able to offer and what the city is going to be able to offer, and budgets have been cut. We are very lucky that the city has funded arts and culture, but it is somewhat reduced from what it had been in the past. So I think the other thing is trying to find ways that we can incorporate into the district needs is how we can best serve the arts community in what we're proposing to go forward. So, I mean, it's that there have been suggestions that education take place outside. There's still a lot of up in the air as to exactly how schools are going to proceed and how arts programs that service children are going to deal with that, as well as the venues for artists. We don't know when the theaters are going to open, the galleries, you know, and how they will be affected by COVID-19. So it looks like that's going to be with us for a while. So for some reason, Bing is having a fit. I don't think she likes the lightning. So at any rate, just a minute. Boo-boo, enough. The commentary from downstairs that, so at any rate, maybe it would be helpful if we went through each one, each point, okay, because the original was in the face of intensifying gentrification and the growth of exclusive private cultural amenities in the district. Neighborhood art venues, libraries, community parks often provide low-cost access to cultural program, and arts and culture should be integrated into the planning of city projects as designated arts and cultural spaces. CB3 has identified ways in which the city can achieve this. Okay, the Department of Cultural Affairs should follow the recommendations of Create NYC Cultural Plan by supporting arts organizations to expand, promote diversity and inclusion in the cultural workforce, and increase language access for communications and cultural programming to reach a broader, more inclusive audience, programs that support the cultural life of low-income communities and marginalized groups. Okay, do you feel that, would you like to comment in terms of whether or not that you feel like we should continue in this vein? That Anisha or?
I'm happy to. So economic development already met. And one of the things I think sort of like what Olympia said with land use is, you know, I think we are in just an extraordinary time right now. So we don't fully know what the impacts of, you know, the pandemic will be on arts and culture. And we don't know if the same challenges that arts and culture had in our district from before will persist after. It's likely for some of these things, yes, because they're systemic problems. But I think maybe like between the first paragraph and the second paragraph, we state just some of the things that of the impacts of COVID and the pandemic that we know, right? That performance venues, you know, have closed for the foreseeable future. Cultural workers have lost jobs. You know, some of the things that Olympia probably knows quite a bit about based on her advocacy and experience work, and everybody else also. You know, I think that would like sort of stating that those impacts that we know right now would be a good thing to add.
And we've got a couple of hands up, so Olympia is one of them. So why don't we go with Olympia first? And then
Okay. Olympia? Where are you?
What I was gonna say, don't worry, I unmuted myself. I mean, my idea would be to either edit this to reflect the fact that indeed we do not expect to have, you know, theaters and you know, venues with
Galleries.
high capacity. Galleries may open and may work. Actually, they are part of phase 4, but because they don't really require a huge public assembly. So if somebody is willing to wait and they have a capacity of 2-3 viewers at a time, maybe a gallery can reopen. But I know that all venues that require a certain public assembly and they have very small margins of gain, they're not going to reopen. I think realistically, if we want to brainstorm among with fantastic people that we have here today, I would say if we are aware that this is the city budget, and unfortunately, we cannot do much with the city budget because a lot of things right now, people rely on extending the pandemic unemployment and the enhanced benefits that are set to expire right now. A lot of things depend from the PPP guidelines. A lot of the arts and culture venues are leading now a campaign about changing the PPP loans, and the city cannot do much. So I think what we should be brainstorming from each one of us and our experiences, what could the city actually do? So a low-hanging fruit is the city has already opened the streets for restaurants and outdoor dining, but they haven't done the same effort to open up the streets for socially distanced performance, and with, you know, with in areas like in parks that have a history of being able to have a gate and maybe create even revenue for certain performers, etc. So that is a low-hanging fruit that they could do now. They can already start planning for next summer, because all performing venues, institutions, and artists know that this is going to be here for the next budget too. And also, what the city can do is, if the budget of the city is more affluent, I think right now, you mentioned the schools, what they're doing is they cut social services and arts classes for the kids. So in our district, we know that there's been a flight. There are all those who were more affluent, who have the second houses, they've left. We are very few of us are still here. And so concentrate money to give this kind of classes for, let's call it like the communities that stayed in town that tend to be lower income and people of color. It's going to be very important. And we need to ask, because the DOE has taken out the money from that and the services. So I think these are two things that we could, I think, highlight, and they are pertinent because of the way the city budget that just passed was. And instead, a lot of the other issues that people are facing, the city unfortunately can do little.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Tati?
Hi, yeah. I was going to suggest the same as Anisha, just that we also, and Olympia too, just that we emphasize, you know, the impact of COVID-19. It could be in the same paragraph in the case of intensifying gentrification and the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I just looked up, I mean, I know we're not supposed to use the chat, but I just looked up a study, so I could drop it in the chat. It's COVID-19 impact on nonprofits, arts, and culture in New York City from June 25th. Great. So yeah, I'll put that in the chat, because it has like
that's the Center for the Urban Future. Yeah, that's the Center for the Urban Future, right? LI study.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
it
can hear you.
Okay. So I know so many of the arts organizations in the neighborhood have been impacted. And it's just, you know, every artist I know is like scrambling. So it's just like, I think Olympia's suggestion, if there were more performance allowed, if there were ways that we could incorporate more street art into it, or a way of allowing visual artists to also have a way to show work. But any suggestions about how that we could go about doing that? Ricky, do you have some ideas? Tariq?
I can kind of cite some examples. Like it's again what my job is kind of like doing down at Southridge Seaport, where there's a number of empty storefronts So they're allowing artists to kind of display their artworks in the storefront windows, be it the poetry that I was mentioning, they actually print it in large scale and it's in the windows, or they put a projector inside the empty storefront, and they project and they have it kind of cycling as a slideshow or something like that. So, it helps to maintain the social distance and the access so people can just kind of walk by and see this without having to enter a space. But we're also providing support to the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, which is sponsoring this particular project. So, as a private developer, we're not just coming into a neighborhood, changing it, and trying to build something there. We're actually contributing to the community as well too. So there's that aspect that we can kind of like think about. If there are large, obviously, corporations that are affected, but if they have the capacity to be able to kind of work with some of the cultural institutions and help some local artists do and continue this artwork, that would just kind of be based off of what I know kind of firsthand right now that we're doing.
So do you think that, all right, how would we go about our incorporating this into the district needs statement to encourage businesses, or
I would say maybe let's focus on like maybe landlords or property owners,
right,
both from the commercial or residential side. If they have some type of capacity to be able to work with some kind of cultural institution, and again, it doesn't have to be art. Somebody just Pace University actually just approached our corporation about utilizing some of the space at the Seaport for, I think they hold dance classes for some of their students. And we have, again, empty storefronts, this large space on the Seaport. So if there's some way we can kind of like suggest a connection between like landlords and property owners with some of these cultural institutions to be able to kind of if you have an empty storefront that's not being utilized, rather than having the gate down or something like that, maybe work with the local artists so that it could be the window can be at least a temporary display until you have the space rented out, or if a business continues to remain to be closed or something like that. Again, that's just me kind of spitballing, thinking off the top of my head.
Well, Anisha, do you think we could incorporate any of that, or it needs to be presented to economic development?
I mean, the district needs from arts and culture can be whatever the subcommittee feels it should be. I think if it connects to business, it's totally fine for it to be in this statement. The only thing I would like to be cognizant of is the difference between the district needs, and Michael, you might have the most experience with this, the district needs versus budget priorities, and how we sort of balance describing the needs of the district versus needing to put all of the solutions in this versus following resolutions.
Yeah, I mean that I like that you think I have the experience to know the difference, but no, I mean that is something that Susan always reminds us of, that we have to, she'll be the first one to know, when she reads something that comes out of a district need statement and say, this is an expense, this isn't a district need. So, but it is,
I think that I can help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I think Anisha's point is very valid, because even though this idea may be interesting, what we in the district needs, it's as if you're directing it to a program that you want from a city agency and in their budget line. So let's say, if you think that the Department of City Planning or HPD should allocate money for landlords that do something like that, that's how you could phrase it. However, I personally had my hand up because I don't want us to do such kind of recommendations right now, because the artists don't need to show their work. They need food right now. So I think we should basically have revenue, things that have a consistent way for people to make a living, like revenue producing. Either we ask for grants or for programs that pay them, etc. Because let's be honest, our district is hit. There's going to be much less people, much less spending, etc. So I think we need to be thinking of what can agencies do. Like DOT can open the streets and etc. The DCLA can give grants to event producers. Like we could have things like that. That's the approach of district needs. There was actually Gail Brewer did a special seminar last year about district needs and budget priorities.
Right. I think one of the other things that could be mentioned is that with SLA, they frequently require ambient music as compared to live performers, and that's something else that could be pursued in a way that if restaurants were allowed to have live performance as compared to ambient music, that would be a way of generating an income for performers. That
there isn't going to be any performance for a year now.
What?
There
are
isn't going to be
performances
any.
that are happening now. That
maybe legally or maybe just on the side, but I know it is illegal to perform right now. If they're performing, it's illegal.
Okay, well, I've seen several.
I mean, maybe it's a special permit, I don't know, but I know that generally within a nightlife venue, even at the restaurants, they right now they don't. We had a meeting with Ariel and she was just explaining if it's happening, it's illegal.
Oh wow!
Yeah, Susan confirmed that the other day.
It is illegal
in economic sort of quality of life that it's loud because it's happening outside and people are angry about it.
Well, actually, the performers were inside, and the restaurant customers were outside. So, but I've seen it both on Avenue B and Avenue C. This is getting unnerving with the lightning. So, at any rate, yeah. Okay. So, could we go down to page 11 with the rest, Michael? Michael, could you scroll down to page 11? Okay.
Is that where you need to be? Sorry, there's a lag in the scrolling. So when I do it, it shows up later for you guys.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is that where you need to be or you need to go further down?
No, this is fine. Okay, so we have a phrase for that actually, maybe if you could bring it down because the first part of the sentence is on page 10 and the second part's on page 11. This would include funding for Latinx and people of color, residents, artists, and cultural workers in CD3 with particular focus on Chinatown and Loisaida. So I'm assuming that we would still like to keep this phrase. Okay. All right, the city should explore incentives for developers to provide below market rental space for arts, businesses, and nonprofits in the city, and development should include below market opportunities for arts, businesses, and organizations, as was done for the food business at Essex Crossing. Financial incentives for property owners to provide lower cost rental space to arts and cultural organizations would both lessen the number of vacant storefronts that can blight a block, as well as benefit the arts businesses. That there's so many vacant storefronts right now. That,
I mean, I think the survival of the local cultural institutions depends upon rent relief and long-term, commercial rent stabilization or something, because that's the major issue of every cultural organization right now.
Right, the rent and upkeep, and also keeping employees.
Yeah, so many organizations are closing and small businesses. So, I mean, I think the language here is obviously referring to to a different neighborhood. Like even gentrification right now, it's gonna continue, but it's gonna continue in a different way because there's gonna be vacancies, etc. So I think if we're talking about preservation of cultural venues, you know, we need to create maybe a new phrase in the beginning in which we stress the fact that we do have a lot of small organizations that are seeing hits on their budgets, and we can use some data from the study that the Center for Urban Future has put out and Tati shared, and basically say that this organization will need, you know, for the next budget to reinstate support, make sure that, you know, they're given the I mean, to be honest, I don't know if they're going to survive all the way to the next budget. That's the sad truth. But I think because we have a concentration of the hardest hit communities who are usually catered by these kind of institutions, we need to have a huge premise in the beginning and just talk about the fact that for our district, preserving these institutions and giving them as much financial support for the rent, but also for programming that they can then give back to the communities. And so basically create outdoor programming, etc. We could use, you know, push and put a request for the Department of City Parks instead of cutting everything. They could really imagine we are the garden district of New York, right? Because we have so many community districts, community gardens. If the Parks Department had the real money, they could really have outdoor camps, outdoor classes, and especially for all the kids that they are living in households with first responder parents who are very small and they get no outdoors, you know, space because of the sheltering in place that will continue. And the school will be open 1 day a week in our district. A lot of the public schools in our district are going to have 1 day in school every 2 weeks. So it's like, it's crazy what's going to happen to families with kids. So I believe we need to push for the organizations to be given money, for the Department of City Parks to accommodate them in the parks and the community gardens, for DOT to open safe streets, to give grants for programming to happen. Instead of cutting the art teachers, they should employ all these poor artists that are making no pennies and employ them to do programming in the streets, because the current DOE teachers are not enough, because the classes now are broken also in smaller classes for social distancing.
Right.
And someone needs to be teaching online. Anyway, so it's complex, but I think using the last year's comments, except the ones that describe the demographics that of course are still very valid, I would say everything else will sound like we live in another planet if we put them in, no?
Right. Okay. Tariq. Tariq?
Sorry, my apologies. I have an emergency. I have to
Oh.
I have to leave. My grandmother was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So
Oh no, I am so sorry.
she's on her way to the hospital.
Okay.
So I will
totally
get
understand.
I'll need to get an update about what happened.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
Thanks so much. And I'm so sorry about your grandmother.
I'm so sorry.
Bye. Okay.
Got a couple of hands up from Anisha and from Thomas.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to pull this up so I can see. Okay. So Anisha, Thomas, Thomas, you haven't spoken yet, so please go ahead.
Okay. Something that came up with our youth services, when we addressed certain needs, there was a big need for social workers, and there's a really lack of social workers in the Department of Ed. So that was a need that we focused on. Will we get funded from 18 years experience in the DOE? We're not. And I think that when you, in the first part of on page 10, when it spoke about meeting psychological needs, there may be a way, there is a need in the community for students to have some kind of a therapeutic outlet. A lot of our students are suffering through trauma, and
Right.
maybe there could be a way that we can have artists specifically do some maybe trauma-based kind of programming that could be done remotely and they could be compensated. So, for example, even though the schools are facing heavy budget cuts, there are principals that are still, funding artists to come in and do residencies. I know we've done 3 residencies this year remotely. So there might be a niche right there for artists to integrate and meet a need in the community via the schools. So just want to mention that.
Well, it's sort of like art therapists would be very useful
Absolutely.
for that. But yeah, thank you so much. Anisha? Hi. Anisha?
Sorry, I'm unmuted now. I was going to say that I agree with Olympia that, again, sort of at the beginning, we should just sort of say what the impacts have been. And I particularly agree that we should probably just state that art venues might not survive the next year. That, because of COVID and particularly because of, all of the government mandates, they've been forced to close. And because that has impacted their revenue and ability to, conduct programming, et cetera, that we know that all of them are financially strapped or, trying to navigate how the next year will look. And we anticipate that not all of them will survive going forward. And that means that we will lose some of the cultural institutions that we have in the district, and we'll also lose the employment for the cultural workers that live in the district or anywhere else, frankly. And I think that we should very much explicitly state that because, we don't fully know what's going to happen, but we do know that there are cultural venues that have already said that they won't be able to survive much longer.
Right. The other thing that's a trend with a lot of different organizations is trying to take their programming online and using Zoom. And how could the city help initiative, do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that also, sort of new ways to engage with folks. And then sort of also to what, response to what Olympia said, all this list of other priorities. I do think like, obviously there should be funding and, support for diversity and some of the other initiatives that the city has been talking about. But I think we need to make the distinction about pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Right.
And we probably
that needs to be in the initial statement.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Right. Wendy, do you have some comments? Wendy?
Nothing yet, I'm afraid. I would love to put my video back on, but the storm knocked out my router, so I'm using my data currently.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It was getting really intense there for a while. Okay, so how do you think that the DCLA, the Mayor's Office of Recovery, Resiliency, and the New York City Emergency Management should support arts and cultural organizations' direct participation in resiliency planning as outlined in the Create NYC Cultural Plan? How do you think that they could do that?
I mean, these were priorities when we had different budgets, right? Right now, I don't even think they're going to pursue a lot of the resiliency and essential planning that we need because they're cutting social workers from schools. Like, we are in a different, moment. I think we should just write this new paragraph now all together, pitch in, maybe reactivate the chat this way people can, I don't know, contribute sentences or, otherwise, is someone taking notes so that they can write in real time the sentence and share it on the screen? I guess that would be Michael. Do you want to write on a shared screen? Like we can try to write this sentence that Anissa was saying and share it on real time, or do you want us to use the chat? What will be more effective?
I mean, it's up to you guys. I typically am not the secretary of the committee, but
So
I mean, if you need somebody to be able to type something up, I can try to do it.
Yeah, I think
Something-
it would be effective if it was in chat, and that way we could all access it, because it's going to be harder to do it on, I would think, wouldn't it, online?
with other committees, what we do is the person who takes the notes share their screen. This way everybody sees in real time what that person is writing. And
Okay.
then they just say, you know, they help by just fixing it, you know, orally, and then the person who types needs to just type whatever is the new sentence. Anyway, anything can work. But fundamentally, I think we should just write this new sentence, keep the description of our district, and then evaluate. For now, put in the back burner the majority of these requests.
Yeah. I mean, I can also give out, I mean, Olympia, if you want to take the lead in typing up something that everyone can watch, you know, contribute to.
My screen is a mess, but I can
access to share your screen, and then, you know, you just have to share the one thing you're working on, not everything else.
Right.
I would also say that there's so much that we have to change in this district needs statement just to inform it, you know, by the pandemic, that it might also be even more productive if we sort of like split it up and then come back to our next meeting or not our next meeting, but we did this at Human Services where we sort of assigned everybody with like a certain section, and everybody kind of worked on that section, emailed it, and then I'm assuming that we'll come back with those edits, just because there is so much that I feel like needs to change. It might be more productive to do it that way. But.
Okay.
That's great.
I think that's a good suggestion.
We've done it. Sorry, we've done it in parks like that in the past as well, where everyone's taken a section and the chair has compiled it.
And the schedule-wise, I know that we're supposed to vote it on October. So the only thing we since August we're not meeting, we need to make sure that in September we meet before economic development. This way we can submit it to economic, they can adapt it, and then the full board can see it, because it needs to be voted by October.
Economic development, yeah, so it needs to be voted on by economic development in September.
In September, exactly. So we need to make
sure. October.
Does this sound good, Anissa, to you?
That's fine. We can figure out how to do that. A lot of committees are meeting in August, though, just to put it out there.
Oh, they are?
Economic development certainly is.
And you guys are as well. I just scheduled all the meetings. Every.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
It's so funny. When we want to meet, they don't make us meet. When we don't want to meet, they make us meet.
Yeah.
Like we were begging for a meeting a few months ago. They were like, no.
Right, yeah. Okay, so we're meeting in August, huh?
Blame,
Okay.
That's you.
Okay.
Blame everything on COVID. You know, there was
Right, yeah.
where nobody met and we couldn't meet because we couldn't figure it out. And now because of that, everyone's behind with everything. So we're all meeting in August. Every committee is planning on meeting in August.
Okay. So
All right,
then
so
completely that makes sense.
yeah, what I would suggest then, I like Tati's idea of that we each take a different section and send those emails in prior to the August meeting. And then in August that we can go over the different component parts and put it together.
And
So,
sorry, I just wanted to a suggestion to that too, and that I guess sometime between that and your August meeting is to designate somebody on the committee who's willing to sort of
to act as a secretary.
Yeah. Make so that they can make the edits in real time at your August meeting, and that the August, you know, that everything be compiled in a Word document that can be edited while you guys are meeting.
Right. Okay. That sounds good. So can we roll back to the top of the district needs on page 10 and divide up the sections?
So I have a suggestion about that, because this is not exactly sections, right? And I would say, based on our experience, if each person, and I can volunteer even though I'm up to here, but I can try to do that. If those of you who have ideas, like the social workers or something, with the understanding that we are sending this to the city for their budget, so it needs to somehow be asking the city to prioritize budget lines to specific agencies, right? So if you have any ideas, you can all email them to me and CC Caroline, and I can be the secretary if you want next month, in which I throw in a document all the various ideas that I received, and I can work, maybe if Anisha wants to volunteer, or Tati, to do the introduction paragraph, the one where we're talking about the impact, and the fact that we don't know if the venues are going to be there, and maybe use some data from that study from the Center for Urban Future that Tati was referring to.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that everybody has input, and sometimes it's easier if people take a segment and work on it and then send you that information.
But the segments may be irrelevant. So if you ask someone to work on something that doesn't make any more sense, you're asking them, you're sending them on a goods hand. What is it, the English sentence? Good something. What is it? You know what I mean, right?
Yeah? I'm sorry, not exactly.
Goose chase.
If you're saying that something's irrelevant, and
Goose chase, yes.
a goose chase, a wild goose chase is the,
Yes.
yes.
So basically, if there is like, I don't know, I mean, we can even have a premise in which we say, were the city able by 2021 to have a remarkable comeback, we do want it to fund, you know, our artistic resiliency or stuff like that.
That's how we kind of did it for economic development, frankly, because because the impacts are so great for small businesses and for like employment.
Right, totally.
So we had like a really big paragraph about the impacts for, you know, business, worker, landlord, etc.
Right.
Said like, this is all bad. We need to fix that. And then we still care about these other things that will generally support the district. But I sort of agree with that like that paragraph about like how, I mean, frankly, like arts and culture is really, really hit by the pandemic. Like I would not be surprised if a significant part of cultural orgs do not survive this. And I think that sort of urgency and, you know, needs to be conveyed. I personally think the city knows it, but you know, that's the purpose of this document, to say like what the needs are.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure, Michael.
I mean, it's not called plagiarism if we're taking our own work. So like, Anisha, I would suggest maybe share that first paragraph with Carolyn, and maybe, you know, maybe Carolyn as chair should take on that first paragraph. And then the rest of the document, you know, again, as she's suggesting, maybe if people feel really strongly that they want to update a certain section of this, then they should probably raise their hand and volunteer now for it. Otherwise, they're going to be left out and it will get updated by somebody else.
Or that if there are additional suggestions to add, we could, you know, we could send them all to, you know, Olympia and Carolyn, since Olympia has now offered to be the secretary. And we just use the next committee meeting to edit the draft of what that paragraph of the impacts is, and then go through that list and say, yes, no, this works, this doesn't work. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Use the next meeting as sort of like a working meeting to workshop the
especially since we have so much time. We can meet in August and in September.
Tati, what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I think that's a good idea. I think sorry, I'm looking at the district needs. I think what Michael said to just if people have a specific suggestion, or if they don't say it now, if they email it to Olympia. One thing though that I do think that might be helpful is if, since we are meeting in August, we could maybe invite some cultural organizations to come speak. and just tell us what the needs are, what they say the top 3 needs are, because it's kind of hard to really change our district needs statement if we don't know from the local organizations too directly what they, I mean, we know, but it might be
Right.
helpful to be informed by local organizations as well. If we invite like 3 different issues.
Okay,
I
Thomas,
totally agree.
I keep trying to unmute you, Thomas.
You don't have to unmute people. They can do it themselves.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Hi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I do agree with Tati about the, it would be good to hear what some of the local artists are identifying. And like I said, there is a really big gap in terms of, especially with the youth. And I even, with some of the seniors, just bridging those gaps through some kind of cultural connection. So I don't know how to articulate it, but I could think about it. I'd gladly contribute something along those lines.
Okay, that would be great. So, Ricky? Ricky? Hi, your thoughts? Ricky?
Yeah, I'm fine with the suggestions that everybody made.
Okay, great. All right, so at any rate, everybody will email their suggestions in to me and to Olympia. I think you all got my email, so you have my email address. It's my name at icloud.com. And then we'll be prepared for the August meeting. By that time, Olympia will have set up a Word document that can be edited. Is that a correct understanding, Olympia?
Yes. So for the new members, because of the open meeting law, we're not supposed to have back and forth, right? So any ideas that people have, you can, it's basically, you are just submitting it. I'm just putting it all together, and then I alone maybe can put them in some order and make sure it rolls and prepare a rough draft that then we discuss only publicly at the next meeting. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say is about that great idea of inviting people that Tati said and the others endorsed. I would go farther. If someone wants to come, that's fantastic. But we do have all those email addresses from that research that we've done. So sending an email to all of them on behalf of the committee, of the subcommittee, and saying, we know you're hurting, we're trying to do our best. If there were, you know, up to 3 programs or grants or whatever that the city could do for you next year, what would you like us to ask for? You know, something like that, because you may get more, you know, you may get some people that maybe cannot come that day in August, especially because it's August. And so, but maybe they're willing to, you give them enough time to send you back 1 or 2 lines. And we do have all the email addresses, Caroline, right?
Yes, we have the email addresses. We also have a survey, the Google Form survey that's been sent to the office to be put on letterhead that we could send out, which is basically asking people to update their information. We could include like a section.
I mean, I think right now they're all overwhelmed, but I think if you
It's
tell
a very
them,
simple survey. It's just a
I
matter.
wouldn't fill it.
Hmm?
I don't know, my inbox is exploding, so I'm really not responding to a lot of emails. But I think if you tell them just about the funding and, you know, that we're giving priorities to the city, I think this is so, like, this is so clear and one thing, and it matters, so then you may get more responses. If you ask people too many things these days, they feel overwhelmed, so that you may get less responses.
Right. Well, it's not an extensive survey. And the other thing about it is that we needed it to update the information on the list that we have. So at any rate, that's something to be pursued. So Michael, appreciate your suggestions in managing this.
I just wanted to say 2 other things though, if I could, Colin. I would say, you know, if you are going to do an email to that email list, just be careful about how it's worded, because if you say something about what do you want the city to fund, it's going to make it sound like the city has money to give out that they're not.
Right, and we can't do that.
We don't want to raise people's expectations for something. You know, we want to, phrase it in a way that makes it, we're taking suggestions for what we can advocate for on your behalf, rather than the city has funding. What do you want us to ask for? And the second thing is, if you are going to go the route of inviting organizations to come talk to you at your next meeting, I would just highly suggest that you make sure that there's organizations from all around the district, East Village,
Right.
Lower East Side, Chinatown,
Chinatown.
we're all represented.
Right.
And not just geographically, but also we have very different kind of organizations. So culturally, racially, etc. That's why I believe, because our survey is comprehensive, like our database is comprehensive, an email to all of them, and then say, if you want to come in person, please let us know. And then you see, because otherwise, if you don't invite everybody, that's really a faux pas. You know what I mean? If you invite only certain people and not others.
But you also have to remember, Olympia, that district needs is listed on the agendas. It was listed on tonight's agenda. It was listed on August's agenda also. So,
Right, yeah. That,
so the golden ticket and the chocolate bar, there's not much else we can do.
sure. Yeah, and just as an aside, we were supposed to review the minutes from the previous meeting, but Crystal is not here. And I don't think that we have enough people present to vote on the minutes from February. So that's postponed until August, and hope Crystal will be able to join us in August.
Right.
So I think we've pretty much covered everything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So I don't understand, why do we need Krista to approve our minutes?
Because she was present at that meeting. And I thought that was...
They don't need to be present to vote for the minutes if they're at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. It doesn't matter that if she was present at the meeting in February but not here to vote for the minutes for them, it doesn't matter. You can,
okay.
Yeah, you can vote without her. Typically, what happens is that for meetings, like for instance, for the new members who weren't here for that meeting in February, they would typically abstain from voting because they didn't participate in that meeting. For returning who are just absent today, they just, it doesn't matter. They don't vote either way because they're not here to vote. And it's the way you take your attendance is by voting. So it's the way that you're marking her absent for this meeting.
Okay.
And also there was no rezo in the last minutes, no? So.
Actually, I thought that there was, but that was supposed to be presented to the Economic Development Committee, that we had drafted.
So it's actually, I think these are minutes that we had already voted because the Economic Development Committee met after us or something. You remember it was like so confusing.
It was confusing because COVID-19 hit and everything was canceled. So at any rate,
so what I would
going forward.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is we probably should have done the voting on the minutes at the beginning of the meeting because then we typically have to do a vote to adjourn as well. So we can just do one weirdly combined vote now to approve the minutes from the February meeting.
Minutes meeting.
And to adjourn this meeting.
Okay. So is there a motion on the floor to vote to approve the minutes and to adjourn the meeting?
I move to approve the minutes and adjourn the meeting and see you all in August.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? I think okay, that's crazy because only Tati and Olympia can vote on the minute and myself can vote on the minutes and the rest of the committee can only vote to adjourn.
Yeah.
Well, no, they can abstain though from voting on the minutes.
They're voting.
They present not voting, I think is.
No.
No.
Hold on. Present not voting is what's used when somebody has a conflict. So like, for instance, if I worked for the Department of Transportation and I was somehow on.
No, I understand that. But at the same time too, if they vote to abstain is a no.
Well, yes and no, but the voting to abstain is basically the way that we typically do the approval of the minutes. So we should just because what we've been doing on virtual meetings is just doing a roll call vote so that
Okay.
it's verbally recorded. So I'm happy to just call the names out and do the roll call vote unless Olympia, as the newly minted secretary, you would like to do it.
All right, yeah, you can take
No,
them.
I think you should do it because you are the host of the Zoom and you can see everybody.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Carolyn Radcliffe,
Yes.
Olympia Kazi,
Here, yes.
Ricky Wong,
Yes.
Tatiana Durio,
Yes.
Thomas Rosa,
Abstain.
Wendy Lee.
Yes.
Anisha, are you technically a member of this committee?
I'm not.
All right, so then I'm not calling you.
Don't cry.
All right, guys. Have a
Okay.
good night.
Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
Bye,
coming.
guys.
It was
Bye.
a pleasure to see you all.
Bye.
Bye. So look forward to seeing you in August.
See you then.